Minami-Torishima. It's located in the middle of nowhere, has a large number of land snails with a parasite that can cause meningitis, almost was the site of a clash between Japan and the United States over Guano, and was the inspiration for Birth Island in Pokemon Fire Red, Leaf Green, and Emerald. It also might have vanished in 2015, so yeah. What's the story behind this random island that is just one of the nearly 7,000 that make up Japan? Well, that's exactly what we'll be exploring. And hey, if this sounds interesting to you, subscribe down below, click the bell for notifications so you never miss out on a future episode, and with that out of the way, let's get to it. Located in the northwestern Pacific, some 1,148 miles or 1,848 kilometers from Tokyo, Minami-Torishima is Japan's easternmost territory and the only that lies on the Pacific Plate. It has a rather unique triangular shape, kind of looks like a shark tooth, and saucer-like profile. Surrounded by fringing reefs which in turn enclose a shallow lagoon, the island is about 1 square mile or 1.51 square kilometers in size. The closest nearby Japanese island is South Iwo Jima of the Volcano Islands, which along with the nearby Ogasawara or Bonin Islands, Okino-Torishima, and Minami-Torishima itself are part of Tokyo Prefecture. Geographically speaking, East Island of the Mariana Islands is the closest though, sitting at 631 miles or just over 1,000 kilometers to Minami-Torishima's southwest. The island's name literally translates as Southern Bird Island, and that makes a lot more sense knowing its history, even if it's not very creative and a little morbid. Anyway, before getting into that, let's talk about its discovery. The island was first likely spotted by Captain Bernardo de la Torre of the Spanish Oriental Fleet, who noted an uncharted island sometime in 1543. He rather frustratingly, though, neglected to record its location. It then may have been spotted by Captain Bourne Russell of the British-Australian whaler Lady Rowena in mid-1832. Dubbed William IV's Island in honor of the reigning British monarch, a later description of the island's overall shape, size, and other features was given, although it was incorrectly placed at a southern latitude. This was followed by a more definitive sighting in 1864, when Captain Charles Gillette of the Hawaiian Evangelical Association's missionary ship, Morning Star, noted an island not laid down upon his chart. A U.S. survey ship, the Tuscarora, later recorded its position in 1874. Having by this point become known as Marcus Island, it was reportedly sighted by Saito Kizaemon, a Japanese national, in 1879. 2 landings by Japanese crew members on the still as of yet uninhabited island then occurred respectively in 1885 and 1886. However, it wasn't until 1889 that Marcus Island was officially discovered. Well, kind of. You see, in June of that year, Captain Andrew Ambrose Rosehill of the American commerce ship Julia E. Whalen, later described in newspapers as that well-salted Yankee navigator, happened upon the island. Just a bit of a side note here. It took a fair amount of digging to find out this guy's name. In most historical sources, he's simply listed as Rosehill, Captain Rosehill, maybe you'll see A. Rosehill, A.A. Rosehill. But, you know, it did take a bit of searching around, and ultimately through Find a Grave, awesome resource by the way, I was able to find the guy's original obituary, which, you know, led me to his name, so yeah. Anyway, Rosehill believed the island to be a potential source of coconuts. He soon, however, discovered something of considerably more value: the island's vast deposits of guano, which at the time was a key ingredient in fertilizers. Guano, seabird or bat feces, was in fact considered so important that over in Peru, a period stretching from roughly 1845 to 1866 was known as the Guano era. And, in keeping with this, the United States government passed the so-called Guano Islands Act in 1856, which enabled its citizens to take possession of any unclaimed islands containing guano deposits. Quote, "Whenever any citizen of the United States discovers a deposit of guano on any island, rock, or key, not within the lawful jurisdiction of any other government and not occupied by the citizens of any other government, and takes peaceable possession thereof, and occupies the same such island, rock, or key, may at the discretion of the President be considered as appertaining to the United States." End quote. The islands can be located anywhere, so long as they are not occupied and not within the jurisdiction of another government. Further provisions required the discoverer to notify the U.S. Department of State and file a bond with the Treasury. Thus, Rosehill hoisted the American flag atop a nearby palm tree and left a bottle containing a note, saying that he had taken formal possession of Marcus Island in the name of the United States. And with that, he sailed off. But while Rosehill informed the State Department of his actions, he neglected for many years to file a bond with the US Treasury. And so, when Mizutani Shinroku of Tokyo Kinju Gaisha, Tokyo Bird and Beast Company, found himself on this seemingly unclaimed island in 1896, he inscribed his name on a palm tree, beginning a process that would result in its eventual occupation by the Empire of Japan. Having set off from Chichijima that November in search of the mysterious Grampus Island, an island or group of islands reportedly spotted by British explorer John Meares in 1788, Mizutani's expedition was no more successful than others in locating this phantom island, said to possess a good natural harbor and untouched virgin forests. The island, which continued to capture the attention of explorers well into the Meiji era, gets its name from a killer whale or Risso's dolphin allegedly seen by Meares and crew spouting near its coast. The word Grampus is itself a bit of a mystery, but likely comes from an agglomeration of the Latin Grandus Pisces or the French Grand Poisson, both of which mean big fish. Sorry if my pronunciation is off there. Anyway, unsuccessful in his search for Grampus Island, Mizutani, then returning from Saipan, happened upon a much smaller island in a remote part of the Pacific that December, and soon returned with around 20 migrant workers from Hachijojima and the Ogasawara Islands to hunt seabirds, notably the island's then still large population of albatross. Things started off kinda rough though, because when Mizutani and the others prepared to leave, their boat crashed into a reef and sank. Now, stranded and with no means of contacting the outside world, rumor began to spread that some of the understandably disgruntled workers intended to kill the leader of their ill-fated venture. Upon hearing this, Mizutani devised a plan whereby he would use a small cargo boat called a tenman-sen, which had escaped the wreck relatively undamaged, to head for the Ogasawara Islands and seek help. This would be an arduous journey though, with no guarantee of success, and perhaps because of this, only 3 members of the crew volunteered to go along with Mizutani. After making some repairs and reinforcing the boat, they set sail on the morning of July 10, 1897, and while conditions were initially favorable, the weather soon turned for the worse. Mizutani and the others had to constantly bail water from the less than seaworthy vessel, which while being thrown around in a storm nearly capsized, and if things couldn't get worse, the group soon discovered they had overshot the Ogasawara Islands. Thinking on his feet, Mizutani set course for the Izu Islands instead. This was of a considerably further distance than planned, and so it wasn't long before the group's already limited supplies of water and food were completely exhausted. Mizutani would later claim that he became so desperate for something to eat during this period of time that he eventually ate his own shirt. I mean, it was made of cotton, so there's that. After having been at sea for nearly 3 weeks, they finally spotted land, which turned out to be the Boso Peninsula of the Japanese mainland, and shortly thereafter were rescued by a fishing boat. Having traveled some 1,118 miles, or 1,800 kilometers, word quickly spread, and the group received a hero's welcome in Tokyo. For his role, Mizutani was praised by Enomoto Takeaki, Vice Admiral of the Imperial Japanese Navy, while the 3 crew members that accompanied him were commended and given 10 yen each from the Japan Seafarers Relief Society. Following this, Mizutani submitted a notification of the island's discovery to the Japanese government, and in 1898, the Home Ministry renamed the island Minami-Torishima, or Southern Bird Island. A few days later, the island was designated as part of Ogasawara Village, which was and is part of Tokyo Prefecture. A small village called Mizutani was then established, and its namesake gained a lease on the island for 10 years. Driven by the global demand for exotic bird feathers, then a popular accessory in high fashion, plume hunting on Minami-Torishima exploded, accounting for 70% of the island's total product at one point. In late 1900, the rights to capture 150,000 birds were sold to Kamitake Shichigoro of Yokohama, who began a taxidermy business. This too proved hugely profitable, and following negotiations with Mizutani, who initially wanted the somewhat one-sided contract annulled, the two came to an agreement. Kamitake would continue to manage the taxidermy business, while Mizutani held lease of the land. Importantly though, profits would now be split evenly. Workers on Minami-Torishima, sent by Kamitake from the Kanto and Chubu regions back in Japan, worked 6-month stints, earning 1.5 yen per day for capturing 500 albatross, while taxidermists earned 2 yen for every 100 birds. While profitable, it was dangerous work, as the island was often hit by typhoons and high tides. Fresh water was scarce, and mounds of dead birds left over from the plucking and taxidermy process were simply left to rot, which may in part explain periodic outbreaks of disease, along with the ever-present foul odor that permeated the entirety of the island. Needless to say, the impact on the local bird population was inevitable, and soon the number of albatross had declined so drastically it was rare to see them on the island. Still, Mizutani and others believed they could continue to collect a great amount of plumage on Minami-Torishima for the next few decades at least. But a bit of a problem arose when Rosehill, now backed by the recently formed Marcus Island Guano Company, returned in 1902. In what later became known as the Minami-Torishima incident, Rosehill and members of an expedition sent to assess the island's guano deposits, along with its viability as a cable landing place and/or coaling station, were met by soldiers ferried over by a Japanese cruiser, the Kasagi. At least 15 Japanese Marines, along with an estimated 24 bird hunters and fishermen, were on the island when the Americans arrived. And unfortunately, that's where we're going to have to leave it for this episode. I'm sorry, I know it's a bit of a cliffhanger, and I really didn't intend to make this a two-parter, but we'll pick up our story next episode with the Minami-Torishima incident. Until then, peace.